right here, I've got something called a tessellation. A tessellation is a pattern that repeats a series of shapes that tile. It comes from geometry where you have geometric shapes like squares, triangles, rectangles, rhomboids, things like that, that tessellate or tile, so they fit together perfectly without any gaps or overlaps. So the shape of this puppy dog is tessellated. Now to create a tessellation like this, you need a template, okay? So this is the template that I used to make the tessellation you just saw. And as you can see, it's just a piece of paper that's been cut and taped together and then drawn on to give the appearance of that. So what happens is different parts of this key in to other parts of it, and then it tiles. This was made using the slice method, some people call it, which you take a piece of paper, in this case a 3x5 index card, and you cut it and tape it together. And there's a very specific way in which that's done. But I'm gonna be using not a rectangle for my geometric shape, but a square. So I have to first turn this into a square. If you have two of these cards, you don't even need to measure. You can stack them at 90-degree angles to one another, much like this, and then use the top one as a guide for drawing a line. So that's in fact exactly what I'm going to do instead of using the ruler. I have one though, and this will help me cut a straight line if I'm using an X-Acto knife. So just draw a line against the edge of the top one, and then what you have is you have an area here that is 3 inches by 3 inches, and then your offcut over here, which is 2 by 3. You could even use this again by cutting a small portion of that off to make a square as well. So I like to have a backup just in case, so I'm going to put the one I just drew on top and stack it neatly, then trace a line. Okay, so there we go. Now I've got two with lines on them. I'll set one aside for a backup if I need it later. Now I plan on using an X-Acto knife to do all my cutting, but a pair of scissors works just as well. Some people like to use scissors, they feel safer. I like to use X-Acto knives. I like to live on the edge. Of course, you're not living on the edge if you in fact know how to use an X-Acto knife safely. So I'm getting this lined up. I'm using the straight edge of the ruler to help me get a nice perfect line, keeping my fingers out of the way, of course. Applying some downward pressure on that blade, steadying the workpiece, and making the cut. So I've got, it didn't go all the way through there. So I've got a nicely cut square right here. And this is what I'm going to use to start with. Now, the reason I chose index cards is that they have lines on them, so I can easily reference these lines to help me line up my pieces that I'm cutting off, at least the first cut, and then the second cut, I've got a method to line that up perfectly as well. So I've got some masking tape, I've got my pencil, some cutting tools, okay? The first thing you want to do is you want to draw a line. Now I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna draw a line starting in the upper left-hand corner, moving through the piece, and then back out the bottom left-hand corner. And this is going to guide me in my cutting. So I'm just kinda gonna do a random sort of line. And I don't know exactly what I'm making right now because this is a little bit process driven, okay? I don't want you to try too hard to impose your creative will on this just yet. So we've got this line, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut this real quick. If you're using an X-Acto knife to cut, angle is very important. You wanna make sure that you're not holding the knife at too steep of an angle. You wanna make sure you're cutting into a cutting board. And you want to apply enough downward pressure to get through the material with one pass, because going back in repeating passes can make for not a clean cut. So this is a nice clean cut so far. You don't want to try to make the cut all in one pass, as far as like, you know, one motion. If there's a sharp corner, you know, pull the knife out of the work, like right here. I'm not gonna try to go around that corner. I'm gonna pull out and turn the work and then reinsert for a better angle for more control. You want to try to pull towards you rather than push away from you. And you want to keep your fingers out of the way, but you do want to keep them in the area behind the blade to steady the work and to keep it from slipping, because you are applying some pressure and that can drag things and move things out of your way. So I'm almost done with this cut. There we go. Now if I did my job correctly, this should just kind of fall out. And it almost does. I've got a little bit hanging on right here. So that's when you come in and you just go a little bit further into the corner there, a little bit further into the corner there. Just kind of press. You don't really need to drag or pull. That should do it. Yep, there we go. So I've got two separate pieces. I've got a negative space and a positive shape. This is going to get transferred over to the other side. If we are doing regular translation, it just moves straight across. If we wanted to do reverse translation, what we would do is we would bring it across and flip it over. So those are two different types of tessellations. There's a third type. There's rotational translation. So instead of going across or even going across and flipping, for rotational translation, you rotate 90 degrees and you go up, or you rotate 90 degrees and you go down. It doesn't really matter whether you go up or down, just the fact that you rotated it 90 degrees and put it on either the top or bottom edge of your square. So we're gonna do regular translation, so this is just gonna go straight across. And the great thing about having these lines is I can see my blue and red line up perfectly when I get this proper. So I've got some tape here already to go. I'm going to flip this piece over and put the tape down, half on and half off of it. All right, then I'll lift it up, flip it back over so the sticky side is facing up. And then I can use this just basically like a sticker and be careful to line my blue lines and my red lines up. It's looking pretty good. I've got a little bit of a gap right here I don't want. Masking tape is really good because it's not super sticky and you can have a couple chances to get things just right. If you were to use Scotch tape or a thinner type of paper, you may have difficulty lifting and reapplying the piece. So this is looking pretty good. I'm fairly happy with that. Now, depending on whether you're using scissors or an X-Acto knife, getting rid of this excess tape, there's two different methods. If you're using scissors, what you do is you peel it back slightly from the edge so that you don't risk cutting the edge, and then you just come in and you snip what is coming past and you just smooth it back down. I've got a little bit more to trim right there, so I'm gonna lift that back up and snip just a smidge more. There we go. So that's gonna be safe. What I don't wanna do is cut the actual edge of my index card. The other way, if you have a knife, you can just be careful and trim only the tape, okay? Like that. So two methods, different materials, tools rather. All right, so now I've got one cut done and this piece moved over here. So it's no longer a square, but I still have a flat edge along the top and along the bottom, which is no good. I want to create something that is entirely unlike a square. So I have to create another line and do another cut. Now, this line that I'm going to create can start anywhere along this cut edge, okay? And it can end anywhere along this edge. So it's really up to you to figure out where you want to start and where you want to end, and also how you want your line to look. But you also want to consider that it needs to cross this line right here, which is where these two pieces are coming together. So I'm gonna just kind of pick a spot. I'm gonna go here. Now you don't have to go straight across. You can go around and up and down in all kinds of ways. I'm gonna go up first and maybe back a little bit. And I think I'm gonna come forward now, cross this line, and maybe kind of come and end at this point right here. So I guess I kind of started there and ended there, and that's okay. So now that I've got my line, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it. There we go. This time I wanna make sure I get all the way into that corner. All right, and there's my cut. So now I've got two separate pieces. If I can pick it up, actually, there we go. Now, this is just going to lift up and come down and line up like that. So what you may notice is that this right here is the corner of your original square, and on the top piece, this is the corner of your original square. If you line this corner up with this corner, you'll have this completely and perfectly lined up. So that's what I'm gonna do. That's my method of getting this lined up perfectly. So I'm gonna flip one piece over and apply tape to it. If my tape won't curl up on me, there we go. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut what I think is gonna be excess right now. No, I'll have less to cut later. Flip it back over. Now, before I tape this down, I'm gonna just verify the fit on this. So this came from here, okay? Came from here, and it's just gonna move straight across. So getting those corners lined up is the first thing I'm gonna do. Once that's done, I can make sure that this lines up all the way down and there's no spaces between these two pieces of paper. I've got a little bit of trimming to do here. So just being careful not to cut into my index card paper and changing my shape. There we go. So this is a shape. Now, I don't know what it is just yet. I have to think about it, but I think I'm getting some ideas already. Okay. So to figure out what it is you've made, you've got to kind of flip it over, look at it, kind of turn it, let it sit for a second, and just observe it, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a think real quick. I'm seeing, to me it looks kind of like maybe a bird perched on a branch, or like the stump of an old tree or something like that. The parts that I can identify, I'm looking at this as kind of like the head, kind of a wing back here, perhaps a long tail and part of a branch, definitely part of a branch here, and kind of like a thick trunk with some gnarly roots down here. So once you figure out what it is that you've got, you don't need to make a new outline for what you're drawing. The outline is the edge of the shape. All you have to do is figure out where the details and the contours of the interior of the shape is. Any fine-tipped pen will work. Could even be a ballpoint pen or a Sharpie. It doesn't really matter. I've got a Micron pen right here. Just going over these lines that I've drawn and darkening them. The reason you want to darken your lines is that you want to be able to see them through the paper that you transferred this design to. And the darker they are, the easier that will be. So this is just a process of going over and tracing, which you've already done. And I might add a couple more details here and there if I feel I need to, so I can always tweak or adjust some things. I'm not married to any of the things that I've done. I can always change things if I want to. So if I feel that I placed something incorrectly before, or I need to add something like the detail of a claw or something like that, I can do that. Going straight onto everything and tracing everything exactly is okay, but you are totally allowed to change anything you need to if you feel that you placed some lines incorrectly. Well, here's the template that I created. Pretty easy to do. All it took was a piece of index card cut into a square, and then using my X-Acto knife to cut out different parts and move them over, tape them down, cut another part, move it up, tape it down, and then finally to figure out what it was that I created, draw that, and then ink it. And here we go. This is ready to be traced on a piece of paper. So you would trace the outline first and then fit it in. So I'll show you a little bit of that process right now. So just a little proof of concept. Here's the template. I'm just gonna put it right in the middle of my little piece of paper here. And holding it firmly in place and keeping your pencil pretty much vertical, you're gonna trace around the shape as accurately as you possibly can and carefully as you can. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna create a perfect outline of the shape that you created, which we will then be able to move the template into a different location, fit it up into the shape that we just drew, or traced rather, and you will see how this works. Okay, almost there. I think that's it. Okay, there we go. So we have a good tracing of our shape. Now, this is how this works. You're gonna look at the parts that you have. Now I can clearly see that this head shape is repeated right here. So if I take this template, I should be able to fit that in right there and trace it again. I could also fit it in. If I look at this shape, that's recognizable as that, so I should be able to fit the tail over the back and lock that in right there, okay? And then These other parts are a bit trickier, but not too tricky because this shape right here mimics this shape right here. So I should be able to fit that in right there. Yes, yes indeed. So that fits there. And then of course down here, this line is the same as this line and this curve is the same as this curve. So I should be able to fit that right there, just like that. This is what it looks like after you trace all of the outlines to fill up your space. You can see that the shapes interlock pretty much perfectly. There's one or two places here where I kind of was off slightly and I had to readjust. If that happens to you, no big deal. Just readjust, erase what you need to erase, clean up what you need to clean up, and move on. The next step would be to take this and put it behind the paper, find out where it needs to go, and then trace it on the paper. Now, if your paper is thin enough, you can easily see the lines through the paper, and I can see some lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this lined up and do a bit of a time lapse of tracing. Always trace with a pencil, don't go straight into a pen. But if you can't see it through, then you may need to use a window, the light coming through a window to help you out, or some kind of light table or LED light behind this to help you see it. That's basically it. That's the process in a nutshell. Once you create the template, you trace it, and then you trace the details that you drew in the template over and over and over again until you fill the entire paper. Then you color it. So from this to this.